Hi, everybody, and welcome to Getting to Know Your Neighbor. The concept behind this is everybody has a neighbor, for the most part. But sometimes you just know your neighbor is Bob and Marge. You don't know they might have an interesting or compelling story or background. Today, we're talking to just such a person, Cathy Burch. Thank you, Cathy, so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cathy, as most of you know, is a reporter for the Arizona Daily Star. If you've ever read the newspaper, you have read some of Cathy's work. So let's start off. Where and when did you decide journalism? That's what I want to do.
High school.
Okay.
I ran out of English classes, and the only class left was journalism. So I took a high school journalism class.
Well, did you read columnists in the paper or like reporting of some sort, or was there a person that inspired you, or just an event, or it just kind of gradually became that's what I want to do?
You know, my parents got the paper, which was incredible, and anybody who orders paper, I love that. So I read the paper, but I didn't read any personalities because I was, 15, and you don't really do that when you're 15. But I wanted to continue doing some sort of writing, but I did not want to write another essay. So I took journalism.
So writing was really what you
key.
wanted to do.
Yeah, that was
okay. So then let's just go back to the very beginning. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Germany, adopted by a military family, and raised probably mostly in Phoenix. We spent some time in Colorado, but then when I was about 7, we moved to Phoenix, and we've been in Arizona since.
Now, I know you have a twin sister.
Mm-hmm.
Now, were you both adopted by the same family?
Yes.
Oh, you were? Okay.
Yeah. No. We actually have, there are 4 of us. So my sister and I obviously were twins, so we're blood related, because that would be really weird if we weren't. And then we also have another brother who was adopted also from Germany. And then when we were in Arizona, early teens, we had a kid stay the night, and he never left. And so that's my brother Daryl.
No kidding.
Yeah, so we have 4 of us.
Okay. And now, do you all keep in touch, I assume?
We do.
Fairly close?
We do. My 3 siblings live in Phoenix, and I live here, and we do keep in touch.
Okay, so you were born in Germany to a military family, so I assume they were stationed there.
We're adopted by a military family.
Adopted by a military family, and so eventually they come back to the United States.
Yes.
And, okay. So walk me now through the progression of through high school and college and how you eventually get to Tucson, Arizona.
I'll make it a Reader's Digest version. So when I was in high school, I wrote for my school paper, and then I also wrote for the Teen Gazette, which was a teen product from the Phoenix Gazette. Ended up getting a scholarship as correspondent of the year, went to ASU. Yes, I did go to ASU. And after ASU, I got a job in Sedona. And it was a really great experience because I worked for a weekly paper, and we covered the birth of a city, because Sedona was not a city at the time I moved there.
Wow.
And they actually incorporated, so I covered the first city council. It was just really just a great civics lesson. And then I landed a job in Niagara Falls, New York, and went there as a reporter, and covered a lot of really interesting stuff. And then I went into, I was an assistant city editor, then I was a city editor, and then my newspaper was being sold, and I said, I cannot be involved in that, I have to leave. And then I ended up applying to Tucson and landed in Tucson.
Well, this is kind of a silly question, but I know you were in Buffalo, so you're a Buffalo Bills fan. But how could you were only there for a brief period? How can you not be an Arizona Cardinals fan?
I was there 7 long winters. Okay.
Well, you've done your time. You did your time.
No, I actually became a Bills fan because when I moved there was when Jim Kelly was the quarterback,
and they went to 4 Super Bowls.
And then they went to 4 Super Bowls the year after I was there, and it's like you just become, you can't be a fan when they win and not when they lose. So
you get a good pass.
But I'm also a Cardinals fan.
Okay. Yeah. Well, then how did you eventually land where you are now with the Arizona Daily Star?
So I got a job at the Arizona Daily Star from Niagara Falls, and when I came to the Star, I was actually an assistant city editor. So I was very focused on news. My entire career has been news. But when I was in Niagara Falls, I would do music to break the monotony of murders and all of that stuff. And I would interview people like Gloria Estefan and Melissa Etheridge when no one knew who she was, and just some really interesting, Eddie Money, and just really fun interviews. And it just broke the monotony, and I just loved it. And when I came here and I started as an assistant city editor, no one was covering country music. I knew nothing about country music. I had been introduced to country music when one of my editors in Niagara Falls said, hey, Garth Brooks is going to be here and he's doing 3 shows at the Odd. Would you cover it? Because he's holding a press conference. I'm like, press conference? What? So I went and I sat there and I'm listening to all these people asking him all these things. And the only thing I knew about him was Friends in Low Places.
Yeah.
Did not listen to country music. Didn't listen to, I listened to R&B and rock. And then I actually got a chance to ask him a question. And I said, so you come into Buffalo, New York, second largest city in New York State. You sell out 3 nights in a matter of minutes and you get the keys to the city for 3 days. Said, am I the only one? And he just looked at me and he took his hat off, and that's when I realized he was like bald. And he said, well, I've never gotten the keys to the city 3 days. And I'm like, okay, there you go. And then I went and saw his show, and I was blown away. I was like, if this is country music, sign me up. And then I became a fan from that point on.
Well, and every time I talk to somebody and country music comes up, Garth, his name comes up. And it's not always just because he's such a superstar country musician, but he has a photographic memory. He goes out of his way to remember people and their family members. There's just something about him that's pretty special.
Okay, so photographic memory with Garth Brooks. Fast forward 2015, I think it was, when he went back here. I have no photographic memory. He holds another press conference when he's doing his concerts again, and he's in Phoenix. And so I'm in the press conference, and I replay this encounter in Buffalo. And he looked at me and goes, I remember that.
I believe it.
And then afterward, we started talking. We got this one-on-one time with him. We started talking, and he remembered everything. And we were talking about that night and that show. And then he gave me a hug. He did not hug anybody else, but he gave me a hug, and I was like, dang, no one had a photo. But it was really cool.
Yeah.
He
Now,
was
you
super
don't,
nice.
you do interview a lot of celebrities, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but your policy is you don't get an autograph or you don't take pictures. It's just not, you're the press.
Yeah, it's not, there's only one person I've done that. And I stood in line, I took my badge off. It was my own time.
Yeah.
I stood in line, and that was for Chris Ledoux. Because he's the real deal. He was such a nice guy. And I just wanted to put a face to a face because I'd interviewed him a number of times, and he was just such a wonderful
Who,
guy.
by the way, is Garth Brooks' hero.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, again, since you've been here, and how long have you been with the Arizona Daily Star?
I just marked 25 years. I started when I was 12. I just marked 25
Prodigy.
years on February 1st.
Well, you do a variety of interviews, I mean, with different topics, especially the music. I've seen your columns with classical music and, of course, the country music. Now, who decides, though, when it's time for you to do a story, who decides? Do you go in and say, hey, I've got a great idea, or do they come to you and say, okay, here's who we want you to talk to?
It's all me.
Really?
Because I know what's going on, and I've been doing this long enough that I know, I kind of know what I'm doing. I've never had an editor ever say, I think you should interview this artist.
No kidding. That surprises me.
We don't. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of cool to have that kind of freedom.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, you get to choose, the people you do interview. Do you ever get people who refer someone to you and say, hey, you should talk to this guy. This is a fascinating story. And it turns out it is?
Every day.
Oh, really?
Every day. I get people who reach out to me all the time. Hey, you should look at this band, or, and I get publicists who reach out to me. Can you interview,
But that's their job.
Well, yeah, I get publicists, but then I do get people who, I just got an email this morning from someone saying, it's a girl who is a performer in town, and her mom always reaches out to me. And says,
it's a local artist. Yeah.
It's a local artist, and I do get national.
That's something that I've always kind of wished that not only the newspapers, but radio and TV would do more stories on local artists. Well, Tucson has a pretty vibrant music scene.
Oh, huge.
And I lean toward the country music, but it's just not just country.
Not just
music.
country.
Yeah.
Not just country. Yeah.
So now, you obviously have a deadline, and I know that a deadline sounds pretty self-explanatory, but what does that mean to you? When somebody must come to you and say, "Here, you're doing this story, and we need it by."
So we work interesting deadlines in the Star because the Caliente is the entertainment magazine, and that comes out.
That's where a lot of your stories.
That's where a lot of my stuff comes, and so it comes out on Thursday. Next Thursday's Caliente, I'm already done. So anything, I moved on. I'm now working toward 2 weeks. So I'm always living 2 weeks in the
Well,
future.
what if something really unusual happens? Can you kind of
Yeah,
shift gears?
we can shift gears. We also can put it in the daily. We can
Oh,
put
yeah,
it,
yeah, yeah.
and sometimes we just do stuff that's online only.
Well, you are, in my opinion, a terrific interviewer. As a
Oh,
matter of
thank
fact, and I think I've told you this, when I first thought of this idea, I was hoping we could do it on television at one time. And I thought of you as the interviewer. I mean, you really do. But walk me through the process. Let's say you get, let's say a classical artist of some sort is coming to town, and you're going to interview them. Walk me through the process of how you do your research and so forth.
Well, the first thing I do, I read the bios, and figure out their history. Because here's the thing: when you're doing these interviews, people don't want to know when were you born. They really that stuff. If they're a fan, they already know that.
Yeah.
But so I go through their bio just so I have an idea.
Sure.
But the first thing I do before I get them on the phone is I want to know where they are. So I look at their itinerary. Where are you? Are you playing for, say, a classical artist? You're playing in New York City. Do you live in New York City? Then I look at their social media. What are they talking about?
Oh, okay.
What is the last thing that happened? And that's basically, and I listen to their music. I always listen to their music. And if a classical artist is coming to perform at the Tucson Symphony, I look at what they're performing, and then I research what the piece is so that I can get an idea. And I also research, do they record it? Is it something that is in there real well, that this is what they perform this is a signature piece, and then when I get them on the phone, I have a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wing it.
And that's obviously those are the best interviews. I'm not as good as you, so I have my little bullet points here. But I've just always been amazed. Sometimes I will read an article about you, and sometimes I think you had 4 articles in the Caliente yesterday.
Yeah.
Was it 4?
Yeah, at least.
And I'm always interested how you can shift from one genre to another. When you do a country music artist, I kind of have an idea of where you're going, what you're talking about, and then you switch to a symphony, right. And it's like, how do you know this stuff? I guess you just do your research.
I fake it.
Well, you do it well. I'll say that. Yeah. Now, I know too that you have pretty strong opinions on things.
No.
You don't? Because you could have fooled me.
Yeah.
Now, I know when you're in media, whether it be TV, radio, newspaper, whatnot, you're going to get feedback from people, and
right.
not always do they agree with you. You have to have a thick skin. Right. Tell me about some of the more memorable things people have said to you that maybe they didn't agree with something you've said over
right.
the years, maybe something you recall.
Yeah. Well, I had a guy who, I'm going to really quickly give you the backstory. When I first started doing music, I did country music, right. And this was in the heyday when we had a pop music critic and we had a rock music and classical and country.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that disappeared. They asked me when we went and downsized, they said, do you want to do classical music? And I'm like, here's what I know about classical music. There's a guy with a stick and he's waving it. I know nothing. I ended up doing in National Endowment for the Arts classical music and opera fellowship in New York City for 3 weeks. And it was like classical music boot camp.
Okay.
And, you spent hours in Columbia University listening to musicologists talk about music and composers, and you talked to critics, and then you would go and you would have to watch these performances and come back and write a review and have it criticized by Terry Teachout, who is like, he just recently passed away, but he was like the god of culture, culture reporting, and he would tell you that it sucked, and you're like, oh, okay, you can't be crushed, I got to learn. And anyway, I came back and started doing classical music, and it was always, I would sit there and like research the instruments, because I didn't know any of those instruments, and so it was very painstaking. But it was a great, experience, and it was every week it would just get easier and easier. And I had this guy who would always write me these letters that these emails. Oh my God, I can't believe they pay you, and you're horrible. And so I would always respond by, thank you for reading, and thank you for thank you for writing in. Thank you for taking the time to write in. And then I would just.
But was that a sarcastic, or was that just trying to diffuse?
It was diffusing.
Yeah.
But then one day he wrote, and he just laid into me. And I wrote to him and I said, thank you for reading. And then 20 minutes later, I'm like, no.
Yeah.
And I went back on and I said, you know what? I said, I do thank you for reading. And I do thank you for taking the time. And, and I basically kind of sarcastically but professionally, said, "It is people like you I think about when I have 35 minutes to write a review on deadline. And it's people I think about when I am sitting in Tucson Music Hall and I am absorbing this music and thinking, what would you think sitting next to me?" So yes, I do thank you for reading, and I do thank you for writing in, and I look forward to it. The guy wrote me a letter and said, next time I have something to say to you, I'm going to hit pause. And I
Wow.
was like, good, that's it.
So you kind of took it as almost constructive criticism, even though that probably wasn't the way it was meant.
And I did, and basically I wanted to tell him a lesson too. You don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I mean, you can sit there from your Monday morning quarterback and tell me I'm garbage, but let me see you come out and do this and
On a
try to
deadline.
make this, and try to also make this so that someone who doesn't have a music degree, who isn't a musicologist, can experience that. Because that's all I do. I mean, I just want to put someone in the seat next to me.
Well, but on the other hand, have there been instances where maybe you've almost changed somebody's life, where somebody has written you and said, I really appreciate that. That really hit me or moved me or something like that?
I get a guy who texts me every time I write a review of the symphony, and I won't say his name. He owns a restaurant in town, and he always texts me and says, thank you very much. You always hit the notes, and I always feel like I'm there with you. I'm sorry I missed a concert. And P.S., you and your husband should come to my restaurant. I want to buy you dinner. And I always say, oh, thank you. That's very nice.
Because you can't really do that, can
No,
you? Yeah.
no.
And he's probably hoping you'll give him a favorable review. Because you also do food reviews.
I don't do food reviews. I do food reporting.
Oh, tell me the difference.
Okay, so I write about, I don't get to eat, which is probably good. I write about the openings and closings and trends in restaurants.
Oh, okay.
So.
And there's a lot of that going on, both opening and closing.
Yes. Yeah, and that's a whole different kind of writing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's hard news reporting, but that's also having to have an idea of what the food is like, and so that's a whole different kind.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of are a jack of all trades. I mean, I've always been kind of amazed. Usually somebody has this is what I do. Mm-hmm. Well, with you, it's this is what I do, and this, and this, mm-hmm. and this. So it's interesting. Now, again, you've interviewed over the course of 25 years countless, not just celebrities, but interesting and compelling people. Right. Give me a half a dozen people that just stick out in your mind.
Fred Balazs. Fred Balazs was the conductor, one of the first paid conductors, the first paid conductor of the Tucson Symphony Orchestra, and he and I had a relationship that went about 10 years from the time he turned, about 8 years, from the time he turned 90 till the day he died.
I think I remember you writing about that a little bit.
Yeah, and he was just wonderful. I love listening to his stories. He would tell these stories, and I would always tell him, oh my God, Fred, you are such a good writer. And he actually started writing his memoirs. And I have his memoirs. Whoa. He had given them to me because he said he didn't want them to get lost. Yeah. And then he stopped writing, and then he sadly died. But wonderful guy. So he sticks out of my mind. Let's see. There was a guy in Nogales, I think it was, who reached out to me and said, Herb Alpert's coming to town, and I have this great Herb Alpert story. And I was like, okay, whatever. Tell me Herb Alpert's story. He mailed himself to Herb Alpert.
He mailed himself?
He mailed himself to Herb Alpert on Herb Alpert's birthday in order to get a record so that Herb Alpert would listen to his record and give him a recording contract. What record label did he have? ARS or Atlantic?
Oh, okay.
I think it was Atlantic Records.
So this was a musician.
This was a musician.
And he was looking to
he mailed
have
himself.
An in. Okay.
Yeah, and so he was really fun. I mean, there's so many, that, there was the kid in Elgin who runs a Keefe Maynard, I can't remember his last name, but he has a winery, and really great story. He was in his storeroom and a barrel of wine fell on his head.
Ooh.
And he was bleeding, gash in his head, and I wrote a story about it was the 6 months that no one would want to live, and it was in that 6 months, not only did he almost die from that, but then he got diagnosed with lung cancer. It was just this incredible story. Yeah. Neat guy, really neat guy.
I mean, you must sometimes just think about, boy, I've really met and heard some interesting stories from people. I mean, tell me your Bill Cosby story. I know he didn't offer you a drink this particular time, but
yeah, Bill Cosby came to Tucson. He wasn't doing any interviews. He was at Desert Diamond Casino, and it was like the first time he'd ever been here, one of the first times in decades. And so I went to review it, and Desert Diamond Casino had this habit of putting me in the front row, even though I was like, you don't have to put me in the
I
front row.
remember seeing you there at concerts, yeah.
So they put me in the front row, and I'm sitting there, and I had my legs crossed, and I have my notebook, and I'm trying to discreetly write notes. And Bill Cosby was sitting on the edge of the stage, and it was during the NCAA. We were in the basketball team we ended up losing that night anyways. And so he basically was, okay, guys, get over it, now focus on me. So he's doing his show, and I'm taking my notes, and he looks straight at me, and he says, what are you doing? And I'm like, I just looked at him, I said, and he was like, come here. And it was like, it was right out of Heathcliff Huxtable. It was right out of, it was like
I can picture
the
him
Cosby
doing
Show.
that.
He's like,
Yeah.
come here. He comes up there, and he was like, he takes my hand, and he's like, what are you doing? So I'm leaning over, I'm whispering in his ear, I'm so sorry, Mr. Cosby, I'm a reporter for the Arizona Daily Star. I didn't mean to disturb you. And he's like, you're a reporter. And I'm like, and then he proceeds to grill me. Do you have children and all this stuff? And I was like,
I can hear him. You are a reporter.
and it was like, oh my gosh. So anyway, it only went on for like literally 45 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. Yeah. So I sit down, everybody's laughing, I'm being mocked, whatever, I'm good, it's cool. I sit down, I go back to the newsroom, I'm on deadline, I get a call from Fernando, who calls me and says, hey, where'd you go? And I'm like, what do you mean? He
Fernando is the entertainment director.
Entertainment director, great guy, Fernando Campos. And he says, why? He goes, where were you? And I said, hey, I'm on deadline. I had to get back to him. He goes, Mr. Cosby wanted to meet you. And I'm like, oh. And it was right after all these stories had come out with the doping and groping.
Yeah.
And, it was before any charges. And I was like, oh man, I missed my opportunity. But it was pretty funny.
Well, have you ever been in the middle of an interview and just felt like, this is really not going well?
A lot of times.
Oh, really?
No, I actually have a lot of times. I've only had one interview that I've killed because it wasn't that the interview was going bad, it was that the person I was interviewing literally was having a meltdown.
Oh my.
Yeah, and I was his therapy session, and the things he was saying, I was like, if I report this, his career's over. And, some people would say, oh, you should have reported it. That really isn't my job.
Right.
The guy was in a really vulnerable state, and it was like, I wasn't going to do that. And so I ended up after the conversation, and we were on the phone for like 45 minutes, and then I called his publicist, and I said, I just want to let you know I'm not writing the story. And she's like, why? And I said, I think you should probably reach out to him. I think he needs some help.
Wow.
His career has since tanked, but he had some really wonderful songs, but that was probably the worst.
Have you ever, after an interview, or after the article has come out in the newspaper, the person that you interviewed contacted you and voiced some displeasure? I mean, I know you've had people contact you and say, I loved what you did, thank you, but has anybody ever just said, I'm not happy with that?
Well, news stories. I've never had anybody do that as far as my music or, any of my music writing. I've never had anybody do that. I have, on the news side, I did have one guy who called me, a restaurant operator called me and just reamed me a new one. I'm getting you fired. And he sent letters. He was mad because I actually did reporting and I didn't just, work as his mouthpiece. And he was really upset because I reported some information I found in court documents and stuff. And he was really upset. But I've never had anybody, no, I haven't. I mean, I record, especially my celebrity, the national acts, I record those. And I talk, when I do local acts, I always end the conversation with local people by saying, hey, if I have a follow-up question, can I call you back? And I'll warn you, I'm going to be a pest. And I will call them back because I do not want to have an issue. I hate, corrections are the most, they're just soul crushing.
It sounds like you almost have to have a certain personality to be able to do what you do, because if you're pretty meek and mild, you're going to get run over.
You're going to get run over.
Yeah.
I teach at the U of A. I've taught there for 20 years now, and I tell my students, when I tell them, to interview the president of the university, or if you want to do an entertainment story, interview the artist. And they're like, well, they're not going to talk to me. I said, well, first of all, they're going to talk to you because you are a student, especially if it's arts, and you are perceived as having money. They want to talk to you because you're going to buy their tickets, you're going to buy their CDs, their merch. But secondly, I said, if you don't ask, I said, what if they say yes? I said, if they say no, little tiny word, hurts for a minute, you move on.
Yeah.
But what if they say yes?
You do teach at Arizona University. When you're up in front of a classroom of a potential or future journalist, You teach, I'm sure, the basics, whatever it is, but there must be some kind of advice that is your advice, not somebody else's, but your advice that you pass along to them.
Wow. I do. I mean, I tell, I start out my class, I won't say it because I always tell them that editors are a-holes and that their next class, they're going to tell you that I was an a-hole.
Right.
I said, because this is a very subjective, business, you're going to work for people who have different opinions. And I always tell them, this is not something that you can learn. This journalism has to be something that you feel in your soul. Otherwise, you might as well get a job at McDonald's where you can get free fries.
Right.
Because the pay is not going to be glorious. You're not going to, you got to love it.
Is there anybody, let's say nationally or in Tucson too, that you haven't had a chance to interview that you're just chomping at the bit to get to?
George Strait.
Well, you and 800 million other journalists are saying that.
Else.
He doesn't do much at all.
He doesn't do anything.
You know, they had a thing in Nashville for a while because everybody wanted to get the George Strait deal. You record one album a year and you do about a dozen concerts and then you go back to your ranch. Right. You know, whereas most people, they want you to churn out the records. They want you to do 200, 250, 300 shows a year. George, he found a way, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. I don't know. I remember when I was in high school, I really, really, really loved Fleetwood Mac and really, really, really loved Stevie Nicks. And I had got, initially when I was in journalism, I was like, I want to be an entertainment writer so I can interview Stevie Nicks. And then my career went in a totally different direction. I went totally into hard news. And then I ended up going, coming back to features and entertainment, and Stevie Nicks was coming on tour, and I was like, I'm going to interview Stevie Nicks.
And did you?
I did, and I hung up the phone after the interview, and I turned to my editor at the time, her name is Ann Brown, and I said, well, Ann, I can now call this a career.
Because this was what you...
Dealer out.
Now, that brings up another question. I mean, you were obviously happy with that. Have you ever gone into an interview thinking, man, I just really like this person, and come away thinking, maybe not so much?
I did have one interview like that, I won't name, but I was really kind of mad because the parameters of the interview, they tell you how much time you got. And so it's and that's why I record my interviews, because I don't want to say, hold on while I type, and I want to have a flowing conversation. And so I was having an interview with this person and I had 10 minutes. And so I knew exactly where points I need to hit. And when I do interviews, I don't do questions. I do, here's talking points.
Yeah.
Here's things I need to cover. So I had to reduce talking points. This person went off the record for 6 minutes. And then at 10 minutes said, oh, well, you know what? We got to go.
So you only had 4 minutes? Is it?
I was furious. Yeah. And I ended up not even writing up the interview. I just wrote up a highlight. I was furious. And when they offered an interview with this artist again, I was like, no.
So when you say off the record, that meant whatever they said you could not print.
Exactly.
Okay.
It was not fair game. And so I agreed because I thought it was going to be a minute. And I thought she was going to, it was a woman. I thought she was going to tell me some really cool stuff, some inside scoop on Nashville. No. Told me all this stuff. I was like, oh my gosh.
Tell me about your family.
I'm married. My husband just retired. He was a chef, and he still is a chef at home. I do dishes. We have an agreement. He doesn't write. I don't cook. It works.
Stay with your strong points.
We stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. I have 2 daughters. I have Angie is my oldest, and Angie is an amazing singer. Just incredible. I was so happy. She lives in Tempe. She goes to ASU. And she told me the other day that she's changing her major to music, which I'm so thrilled about because she's just an amazing talent. And I have my youngest daughter is 19. She's a sophomore at St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas. And she plays basketball.
She's a basketball player,
she's
right?
She's a basketball player.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's 6'3". We have no idea where she got that size.
Your husband's pretty tall.
Well, he's 6.
Yeah.
But yeah, she plays basketball.
That's pretty cool. You must be proud of all 3 of them. But to have a daughter who's an entertainer and a daughter who's an athlete, that's kind of cool.
Well, and it's kind of cool.
to be able to follow that.
Yeah, it's cool for me because my life, my passions are I absolutely love music, every aspect of music and entertainment, and then my other passion is I love sports and I love basketball. So I have 2 kids who are feeding my soul on both ends.
Wouldn't it be cool if one day your daughter was playing in a basketball game and your other daughter was singing the national anthem?
I'm going to get that. I'm going to arrange that. I'm arranging that.
Well,
St. Ed's.
Let me ask you, it seems like a lot of people who work for newspapers or magazines or even television news stations, somewhere in there, there's a book. Do you have that desire?
You know, I do have that desire, but I don't have the energy. It's like when you write for 8 hours a day,
Yeah.
and then it's like, oh, let me spend my free time writing. It's like, you know, I have all these really great ideas, you know, and but they, you know, until I retire, which will not be for a while. I mean, I don't think I'm gonna.
Well, one more quick question on the writing. You say 8 hours a day. Do you have a process? I mean, do you go in and say, okay, I know the subject matter, and you start writing and say you write an outline and then you go back and kind of put some detail to it, or how do you do that?
So it's really interesting. My process is like really, it kind of fluctuates. I mean, it depends on the interview. A lot of times when I'm actually transcribing an interview, I will be writing the story as I go. Because something will hit me, and you know the hardest part of writing for journalists, and I think even if you're writing an essay or a term paper, is how do I start it? And once you start it, once you start it, it's like, oh, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, and I have this and this, and I'm plugging this, and you know, and it kind of flows and it makes sense. But yeah, I mean, I don't do outlines. I do have a friend who, you know, sometimes I'll be really excited about a story, and then when it comes to writing, I'm like, I really hate this story. And so, you know, why did I think this was a good story? And then I will call this friend, her name is Kathleen Allen, and Cathy was the longtime theater critic at the Star and in Tucson.
I remember her name.
Yeah. And she still writes for the Star. She's a freelancer, and I will call Cathy and I'll say, talk me off the ledge. And she'll sit there and she'll say, okay, so what do you have? And then she'll say, why is this story? She'll just tell me about the story. And then as I'm talking to her, I'm like, oh, this is why I like this story. And then she'll say, what if you do this and this? And 9 times out of 10, I do not take her advice. But she has jogged me. She has given me I cannot do this if I'm by myself, because she asked me questions that suddenly it's like, oh, well, that's it. And then I'll be able to write it.
It's always good to have somebody to bounce things off of, you know, somebody that you know and respect. When your columns come out, and again, a lot of time, Thursdays in the Caliente, you do a lot of stuff in there. Do you immediately go to it and read it to see? No?
No.
You don't even want to see if the editor didn't
no, because, well,
when
we do proofs, you know, we proof the pages before they get published. And that's the opportunity I look and I see. And, you know, to be honest, and I'm not patting myself on the back, I've been doing this for 1,000 years. Yeah. And so a lot of times I get very little editing, and when they do edit it, I'm like, geez, that's a great edit. Okay, I'm taking credit for it.
But you just don't read it because you've already been there and done that, or you just
It's because I've moved on.
Oh, okay.
You know, I mean, I've moved on because, like I said, I'm living a week and a half, 2 weeks in the future at all times. And so it's like, and I will have an editor and say, hey, I have a question about such and such. And I'm like, I wrote that 3 weeks ago. Just tell me what the answer is. You know, just tell me what the question is, and then I'll look at the story and I'll be, oh yeah, that was boneheaded. Okay, and I'll make this.
So whenever an article comes out and somebody does call you or write you, you're thinking, gosh, I have to go back and now look and see what you're even talking about.
I do. Yeah. I had someone who had written me and said, oh, thank you for writing this story. I'm like, did I write that story? And then I did go through and I'm like, oh yeah, we did write that. Okay, good. Didn't miss that.
Well, again, you write on so many different topics, and it just amazes me how you can come up with the detail that you do. Cathy Burch, reporter for the Arizona Daily Star. You can catch her work, of course, in the Daily Star, but especially on Thursdays, right? In the Caliente section of the Daily Star. Yeah, in the Sunday
Home and Life.
Sunday Home and Life, okay. Yep. Well, Cathy, I know you have deadlines, so I appreciate you taking the time to come up here. Thanks so much.
This has been fun. This has been a lot of fun.
Well, you've been watching Getting to Know Your Neighbor.